most importantly for me, as a person who grew up in an immigrant community, where here in the U.S., I was constantly asked, where are you from? What are you? You know, I mean, you get asked all the time. I'm Bolivian, I'm Aymara. I'm Bolivian, I come from a Quechua community. You know, you repeat. And then to come back home and then try to speak with people, but they look at me, I'm mixed. I have American clothes. They say, oh, she's not one of us, you know? When I had that experience without my grandmother, not being able to speak, just to even get simple things from the market, I felt like a little leaf that had been blown off a tree. I felt this loss. I mean, this indescribable loss that I think a lot of people who are interested in language or who have any connection to their culture, I think can understand.
Connected Conversations with Lena Prova. Bridging Worlds. One conversation at a time. To keep this video concise and engaging, we will be displaying only the final part of the interpreter's translation during the conversation between Lena and our guests today.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Connected Conversations. Today we are here to talk about the importance of language in our identity. More than 300 indigenous languages died in the past years. And they didn't die just because people stopped talking and using those languages. They died because people were not allowed to use those languages. And very often we're saying that, oh, that just happened in the past and it's not happening anymore. But the reality is that it's happening today. Many of you probably read the book Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grant. And if you didn't read that book, maybe you watched the movie. That story happened only 100 years ago, and that was not that far. There was also a massacre that happened in 2003, and today we will talk about it. In addition to that, there is a war in Ukraine, and it's happening today. The world is bleeding, and people care about their identity. You can say that the war is about resources, the war is about things that are not related to identity. There is conflict in West Asia, and it's true. And the massacre in 2003 was related to gas. But above all, we want to be who we are, and language and culture is a part of it. So today we have Shana and Eber, and they are language activists. Guys, thank you for coming. Please tell us your story, what language you speak. You're both artists, and you both speak Aymara and Quechua, correct? But you're also both, well, Shana, you were born here in Washington, DMV area, right?
Yes.
And you are connected to Bolivia. Please tell us how it all happened.
Con nosotros tenemos hoy a Shana y Eber, quienes son activistas de las lenguas, de los idiomas. Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros. Quisiera que nos contaran su historia, sobre su causa. Ustedes son artistas, conocen la lengua aymara y quechua. Shana, de hecho, nació aquí en DC, pero también es boliviana. Quisiera que nos contaran un poco sobre su historia, por favor.
First of all, thank you so much for having us here. We're very excited to speak with you and to share our stories. So my name is Shana Inofuentes Ra, and I was born in New York City, but I was raised in the DMV area, in the Washington, D.C. area, in the U.S.'s largest Bolivian and largest Quechua community in the U.S., with approximately 300,000 people. And so my father is Bolivian, Aymara, which is a language and culture that comes from the highest of the high Andes, about 2.5 miles above sea level. We're talking really high, over twice the height of Colorado, Denver. And my mother is American, and she is the grandchild of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, so Ashkenazi Jewish. And that's why I have an interesting name. My first name is comes from Hebrew. And then my middle name is my grandmother's name from Bolivia, Elena. And then my last name, of course, is Bolivian. And language has always been, an interesting part of my life. I grew up hearing one grandmother speak Aymara, and then another grandmother speak Yiddish, and then in my community, hearing parents speak Quechua. In the Andes, Aymara and Quechua are very closely related. We share territory, we share families, and in the past, from what I understand, from historical records, our communities weren't really divided as Quechuas or Aymaras. It was just language diversity that was even more so than today, and we coexisted in the high Andes. In the last 100 years or so, being Quechua or being Aymara has been sort of differentiated, but we're really all high Andean peoples.
Las comunidades Aymara y Quechua pertenecen más o menos al mismo territorio y en el pasado, de hecho, eran parte de algo mucho más, una comunidad mucho más rica que no estaban divididas de la misma forma. Se compartía la diversidad y coexistían. Y esto es algo que por años nos ha diferenciado a nuestros pueblos.
And if I might add briefly, that's okay. So I'm currently I'm an Indigenous art activist, an Aymara art activist, a language activist, and I'm currently the founder and president of the nonprofit called The Quechua Project, which is based here in the DMV in the DC area to foment the revitalization of the Quechua language or other indigenous languages in the Bolivian immigrant community transgenerationally, so between the generations. And I'm also the co-founder here with my husband Eber of an indigenous consulting and creative firm called Chama Native Americas. We provide a variety of services. We do language work as well. And we're also currently in the early stages of producing our first documentary film.
Ofrecemos servicios lingüísticos para nuestras comunidades y distintas generaciones en esta comunidad, la comunidad de inmigrantes que han llegado a Bolivia.
Thank you. Emma, what is your story?
Bueno, un saludo a todos. Allá ya hermanos decimos, ¿no? Es viva, es un momento de alegría para nosotros. También decimos Kamisaki, Hilatanaka, Cuyacanaka. Saludos hermanos y hermanas, ¿no? Desde Sudamérica. He venido aquí a conocer este país y estoy feliz de estar al lado de mi esposa. Aprovecho este espacio para mandar un saludo a mi nueva familia que me ha abrazado con mucho cariño. Papá Jaime, su esposa, también para Rick, también para Batia, que también son mi nueva familia, ¿no? Y mi persona es profesor de Aymara, el idioma Aymara. Yo he estudiado lingüística. También soy artista. Hago hip hop, hago rap en Aymara, también en Quechua. He viajado por Europa 2 veces. He estado también en Venezuela. He estado también en Argentina y en Perú, ¿no? Mi trabajo artístico continúa y también el apoyo de Shana es muy importante, ¿no? Para continuar en este camino de impulsar a las lenguas, a los idiomas, porque el idioma es un ser vivo, ¿no? Todos formamos parte de ese grande ser, sea inglés, sea ruso, sea otro idioma. Entonces, cada ser humano, mientras hable su idioma o su propio idioma, sea el idioma que le corresponda en cada nación, entonces sigue dando vida a ese ser que es la lengua, ¿no? Y que también está implícito con la cultura, porque no podríamos separar ni lengua ni cultura y otras relaciones que tiene con otras áreas del conocimiento humano.
It doesn't matter if you speak English or Russian or any other language. Every time you express yourself in your language, you keep that language alive. We inject some life into it. It's part of our being. It's part of our culture and many other things that cannot be separated.
Thank you very much, guys. Today, in the world of technology, things are getting easier in a way. And I was involved in some conversations when people say, why do we even need this complexity? Things are getting easier, and English is dominant in so many spheres, particularly business. And when people go to school, it's easier to get accepted if you speak English. Maybe there is Spanish in some other parts of the world. Maybe there is Mandarin. And maybe in next generation or 2 generations from now on, it's going to be 3 languages. And then there is a technology that is going to assist in us to communicate. And that's where we are heading. And when I was listening to it, I was getting really concerned. Really? That's where we are going? Because to me, language is not just means of communication, right? It's really connected to culture. It's really connected to traditions. It's experience. It's life. It's color of our life and spice. It's experience. When I travel, and I travel a lot, I'm looking for something that is going to remind me of what the humanity is. Besides just simple things, I want to learn how people see the world outside of my life here, my routine. When you go to the restaurant, you don't just go to eat because you're hungry. You're looking for experience. And I don't want to lose this. So what is language? What is identity to you guys? Because you fight for it. You're language activists. I want to hear why you're doing what you're doing.
Y ustedes como activistas de los idiomas y del arte, ustedes trabajan, luchan en torno a todo esto. Quisiera que nos hablaran un poco sobre eso.
So I'll start with the scientific response. Because when I first got into language activism, it was connected to a personal story, and I was personally motivated, right? I was like, I see this happening in my community. I saw it happen in my own family. We've got to do something. But we didn't just start stabbing away. I started researching, right? And thanks to, I actually was, at the time I was in a graduate school program at Georgetown University, and they helped, the amazing professors there, and other support from the academic institution was very great, was wonderful. But one thing I learned, which is really important, is that science cares. Scientists care that we're losing language diversity at an enormous rate, right? Just like they care about species diversity being lost, right? Environmental diversity. Apparently, there are secrets to brain scientists care, because there are secrets to brain science hidden in language. Because when you study how every language captures a different sort of intelligence of humans, that's very interconnected with the environment of these humans, and then development of language over centuries and millennia gives scientists clues about human brain development. That's one. Also, it helps, languages help scientists understand human history, deep human history, are also deciphered through language and how it's developed and all that. But of course, besides the very scientific reasons, we are very passionately driven by our own personal reasons. And to me, there's a very special experience that I had, something that made me a language activist, when my grandmother in Bolivia spoke Aymara, but I lived here in Washington. I lived here in the United States. I'd visit her, but not long enough to really learn it fluently. I'm a relearner of Aymara. Okay, I defend myself, but I am not as fluent as I would like to be. I do know enough to teach beginners Aymara, so I am getting better. But the point is, I always thought I would learn Aymara. And then my grandmother, who was a really tough woman, one day got cancer and passed away very quickly. The next time I went back to Bolivia, I let some time pass. I thought it was over, the death. But then I went to the local market and I just wanted to buy some fruit from the country folks, because I live on the edge of the city and it's all natural. It's all from nearby, no pesticides. And I couldn't speak the language. Even though Spanish is one of the official languages of Bolivia, there are a lot of places, even in the capital city, where people speak the indigenous language. And believe you me, you probably get a better interaction with the sellers or maybe even a better price if you speak the local language. But most importantly for me, as a person who grew up in an immigrant community, or here in the U.S., I was constantly asked, where are you from? What are you? You get asked all the time. I'm Bolivian, I'm Aymara. I'm Bolivian, I come from a Quechua community. You repeat. And then to come back home and then try to speak with people, but they look at me, I'm mixed. I have American clothes. They say, oh, she's not one of us, When I had that experience without my grandmother, not being able to speak, just to even get simple things from the market, I felt like a little leaf that had been blown off a tree. I felt this loss. This indescribable loss that I think a lot of people who are interested in language or who have any connection to their culture, I think can understand. Maybe hard to put in words. But that was the moment I realized how much language connects you not only to your own people, to your own community, but to yourself. So that's a little bit of my story.
El idioma es sumamente importante para entendernos, no solamente en las comunidades, sino entre nuestros pueblos, y por ello me interesé a nivel personal.
Bueno, yo tengo una diferente experiencia, ¿no? Pero también se parece un poco a la experiencia de Shana. Hay formas de perder el idioma, ¿no? De desconectarse del idioma. Uno son por decisión de tus padres que ya no te van a hablar, transmitir el idioma. Otras pueden ser por razones de emigrar, viajar, etc. Incluso, pero también hay razones de decisión personal que ya no quiero hablar mi idioma, ¿no? Porque puede haber X razones. En mi caso personal, mis dos abuelos, o los cuatro, son monolingües, ¿no? No hablaban castellano, ¿no? Bueno, ya han fallecido, ya están muertos. No hablaban castellano, no hablaban español. Entonces, yo cuando era niño iba a la escuela, regresaba, solamente mi abuela me hablaba en Aymara, pero mi mamá no me hablaba en Aymara, no entendía. Y cuando ya he sido más mayor, y pregunté, ¿pero por qué no me enseñaba a mí? Pero sí mi abuela me hablaba. Entonces hay que agradecer también mucho a las abuelitas y abuelos otros que sí han transmitido a sus nietos, a pesar que sus padres no lo han hecho, ¿no? Por ejemplo, mi mamá no lo hizo, no sé por qué razones, pero simplemente no lo hizo. Pero yo aprendí de mi abuela, y en la universidad he aprendido ya diferentes formas de analizar el idioma, ¿no? Que deben conocer, que es la lingüística, que existe sintaxis, que existe morfología, que existe sociolingüística, varias formas de analizar el idioma, ¿no? Y bueno, esa es mi experiencia. Ahora igual ya soy profesor de Aymara, ¿no? Pero lo que quiero decir es que hay momentos que toda una sociedad hay una desconexión de poder transmitir el idioma, ¿no?
I went to the university. I learned different ways of identifying linguistic aspects. I learned about syntax, social linguistics, and different aspects that help me understand that.
También algunos no hablan porque se burlan de ellos. Se burlan porque aprenden el idioma aymara, pero también castellano, pero tienen ciertos rasgos del otro idioma en la pronunciación. Por ejemplo, si yo pronuncio esquina, otra persona que tiene más fuerza en aymara, que está aprendiendo castellano, va a decir esquina. En vez de decir fósforo, va a decir púsfuro. Al hablar rápido, entonces el otro idioma se va a aparecer, ¿no? Entonces las otras personas a veces son malos, los niños, los adolescentes son malos, algunos se burlan, entonces bajan la autoestima. En mi enseñanza como profesor he tenido muchos alumnos adultos, entonces cuando yo les enseñaba a pronunciar alguna palabra, sus amigos y compañeros de clase se reían, ¿no? Y yo les decía, no deben burlarse porque se burlan, son adultos, estamos aprendiendo todos juntos, ¿no? Entonces, este tema es un poco delicado también de la reacción de una persona. A veces no te das cuenta, simplemente te ríes. Incluso si estás aprendiendo inglés acá, ¿no? Pronuncias tal vez diferente y te ríes hasta de tu propio padre, podrías reír. Tal vez hay personas que han nacido aquí, han aprendido inglés de niños, pero sus padres no pronuncian bien el inglés que tendría el correcto. Yo pienso que no existe un inglés correcto o otro idioma correcto. Son variantes y estilos de formas de hablar de la persona. Claro que existen espacios como estos que es necesario hablar tal vez más claramente para llegar con un lenguaje, con un speech, como decimos, masivamente, ¿no? Ya no podría tal vez uno usar mi lenguaje más familiar, otra forma, otro estilo, ¿no?
In venues like this, we may have to speak clearly in order to reach the mass, but we need to consider that the register, that's what it's called.
And if I might add, if it's okay to, I think what Eber's getting at is really one of the real principal reasons why we do language activism, for indigenous language activism. He talked about Aymara or Quechua speakers being mocked in Spanish language countries. When we were researching how to approach the Quechua project, how to get young people to speak Quechua again in the United States, where everyone's speaking English, they're not even speaking Spanish, and they're thousands of miles away from their home. We wanted to investigate why. Why is this happening? So what we learned was that language shift happens. I guess in the language science community, they don't call it language loss. They call it language shift. We don't stop speaking. We shift to another language, right? One of the major reasons why is because for centuries, our people have been forced to choose between social and economic safety or who they are, how they dress, how they speak, how they come across. You always had to make that choice. And we're talking about that's a very difficult choice to make. Do you want to live? Do you want your children to live and eat? Do you want them to be discriminated against or face violence? Or do you want them to have a good life? I mean, that's not a choice. You want to have a life. You want to live. You want to be, all humans want that. And unfortunately, in Bolivia, there is centuries of racism that sort of stems from the idea that indigenous people are inferior, that they're somehow less civilized, more barbaric, and that and they're part of human history. It has to die out. To move forward or be modern means not to be indigenous anymore, not to speak your language. And so part of our language activism, and you'll hear that a lot in Eber's music, it's directed at youth, it's directed at the younger generation. But also the reason why I do the Quechua project is to sort of to stand up against that wave of hundreds of years. No, we're not less than. Yes, you can be proud of who you are. There's nothing wrong with who you are. It's a beautiful, wonderful, strong thing that can exist with modernity, can exist in the city, can exist in United States. Maybe if Bolivians migrate to Russia, could exist in Russia, could exist in Australia, anywhere. And there's nothing inherently inferior about us or our language.
Queremos cambiar esta mentalidad que por cientos de años ha existido, como que lo indígena no es moderno, como que no pertenece a las ciudades, y así ocurre en Estados Unidos, Rusia, Australia y muchos otros lugares. Queremos acabar con ese mito.
I would like to hear about you guys' projects because, Amber, you started your music project right after massacre, and that was your motivation. I would like to hear about this. I'm sure it's going to be very motivational for our listeners. Could you talk about it?
Quiero hablar sobre tus proyectos. Por ejemplo, sé que iniciaste este proyecto musical después de una masacre. ¿Pudieras hablarnos un poco sobre tus motivaciones y cómo llegaste a él?
Bueno, el año 2003 ocurrió muchas masacres de parte de un presidente que ya no está en el poder ahora, ¿no? Entonces hubo muchas protestas en la ciudad del Alto y yo he sido parte de la gente que ha estado luchando en las calles para poder expulsarlo al presidente porque hizo mucho daño, ¿no?, al país el año 2003. Pero lo que sucedió, como es en el poder tiene la televisión, la radio, los periódicos y también tiene el miedo. Y detrás del poder del Estado, en ese tiempo estaban los militares, policías, ¿no? Por lo tanto, mucha gente tenía miedo. No existía el Facebook como ahora, que puedes transmitir cualquier noticia al instante, ¿no? Y hay géneros, ¿no?, en la música, que es la cumbia, el rock, metal, etcétera. Pero esos artistas de esos géneros en Bolivia, algunos no decían nada, no cantaban de lo que estaba pasando. Bueno, hubo algunos, pero el rap del Alto, de Sudamérica, en la ciudad del Alto, nació en ese momento, ¿no? Yo formé parte de varios jóvenes que hicieron música denunciando lo que pasó en ese tiempo y lo que estaba pasando, ¿no? Y actualmente seguimos cantando en el idioma que es de nuestros padres, ¿no? Tal vez dirán, hip hop es de USA, pero ¿por qué está cantando o usando ese género? Nuestro género está mezclado de nosotros, está mezclado con la música autóctona, con los instrumentos autóctonos. Pero hay una visión un poco sesgada de la gente que dice hip hop solo es de USA. En realidad, el hip hop ahora es mundial, el hip hop es universal, está de Tokio a Egipto puedes encontrar hip hop, ¿no? Y yo soy muy feliz estar en la tierra de grandes líderes y grandes artistas, ¿no? Como Chuck D, Public Enemy, varios referentes. He estado en la ciudad en Georgia, Alabama, conociendo lugares, tierras que ha estado Malcolm X, que ha estado Luther King. Nuestra población, nuestra gente ha sido influenciada mucho por sus luchas, ¿no? Porque el idioma no podemos separar simplemente de la cultura y música. Está implícito la historia y en la historia está implícito luchas, guerras, rebeliones actuales, pasadas, ¿no? Entonces, eso es lo que yo he vivido.
Their struggle can be separated from the culture. It's a mix of culture, music, history, rebellions, and struggles and fights, and all that is interconnected.
Thank you for sharing. And how I should say, I'm practicing what you're saying. I cannot even imagine how you connected the music to what you were going through, because there are so many people that would get angry, and who knows what direction you can take your energy and feelings, but you put it into music. Was it difficult to write this decision?
Estoy tratando de conectar todo y de procesar todo lo que dijiste. Me pregunto cómo lograste conectar esto con tu música, cómo expresar lo que viviste y tus sentimientos y emociones, cómo lograste meter todo eso en tu música.
Un artista puede escribir una canción a veces en 10 minutos o a veces puede tardar 2, 4 días, 5 días. Hay grandes artistas que tienen personas que escriben sus canciones porque están dentro de la industria musical y generan mucho dinero, ¿no? Y está bien. Ahora, mi persona y mi grupo, que es Nation Rap, escribimos nuestras propias canciones, compartimos, pero generalmente es de lo que hemos vivido o lo que han vivido otras personas. No inventamos nada que tengo dinero, tengo carros, etcétera, ¿no? Y nosotros hemos sido influenciados por la música americana y es verdad, por el beat, por el ritmo. Entonces, yo escuchaba la música, escuchaba los clásicos de rap y me gustaba porque no necesitaba una trompeta, no necesitaba instrumento, no estaba mi voz para poder hacer las rimas, las canciones, y he aprendido poco a poco, ¿no? He aprendido poco a poco, y esa es mi experiencia. Bueno, no, en realidad no tenía dinero para comprar un piano, no tenía dinero para comprar una guitarra, pero sí tenía mi voz, entonces, y mi experiencia para poder escribir. Ya es una etapa que he madurado, pienso que he madurado un poco más en el hip hop, ¿no? Y tal vez, pero aquí hay, tal vez puedan decir en Sudamérica hip hop, en el alto, una etnia llamada Aymara hace rap. Tal vez les pueda sonar un poco extraño, pero históricamente la humanidad siempre ha compartido cultura, transmisiones, gastronomía, y se ha mezclado, ¿no? Entonces, y también los jóvenes siempre hacen innovación. Entonces, el arte de otra región, la música de otra región para otras personas es un vehículo, una forma de que su cultura y su lengua siga viviendo. Por ejemplo, este vaso puede ser un género musical, solo el vaso, pero yo lo lleno con mi cultura, yo lo lleno con mi conocimiento y música. No ha perdido el género, pero se ha mezclado. Entonces, esto ya va viajando, la música va viajando y compartiendo. Entonces, es una forma que también estamos diversificando y haciendo que de alguna forma nuestro idioma y cultura esté vivo y vigente.
This may be just a glass, but you feel it. You pour your culture and your experiences in there, and then it is something new, and it remains culturally relevant and expressed and shared.
And what about you, Shana? I know that you're an artist too, and you dance and you write. And I looked at some of your writing. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Really beautiful. And so our listeners, I highly recommend to get Shana's website. You'll find a lot of beautiful stories there about Quechua communities here in Washington, D.C. And some of our very talented artists that you write about. How do you express yourselves to art?
Well, my experience is different than Eber's. Es diferente mi experiencia, but it's still connected, right? It still, I think, comes from a similar place. And, well, here in the DMV, here in the Washington area, I was connected to art through dance. So in the area, we have maybe at least 30 dance groups, Bolivian folkloric dance groups. And they're each their own little town, their own little extended family, and they all compete with each other and dance. And then we compete in soccer, and we compete in volleyball, and we compete in beauty contests. We make these little here in the DMV. Anyway, so dance is really big in our community, and I always loved to dance. That's just part of who I am. For many, many years, since I was a young teen, I danced in my folklore group. I was a leader in that group. We won many national competitions. I helped change the dance from the women's role in the specific dance that I did used to be very demure, and we were just like accessories, just to look pretty. But I had some dance training in a different background too, I think because of having an American mom and also seeing that side of dance and going to dance studios. And I also danced on my dance team in high school. I was like, well, why are we just kind of just sitting out here just shaking a little bit? So we worked on changing dance, especially for women, so that we were more forceful. We were more the center of attention, and we were dancing more seriously. I would teach the people in my fraternity, certain moves that come from jazz, that come from flamenco, come from hip hop, and we kind of fused it. So for me, art has been personal expression. It has been keeping my community together. I noticed, I'm a mom now. Back then I wasn't, but I'm a mom, and I saw how much keeping dance exciting and innovating it, our folkloric dances, kept kids closer to our community, right? I mean, it's important to keep them close to the community. Why? You can transmit customs, you can transmit language, you can transmit all of this knowledge that you can't really get from a book, right? And I just think that that's really important and really special. So it's art and culture. I mean, there's language are so integrated and really give you a sense of who you are. And I think that's interesting because sometimes people think about artists as being just very independent, and there is personal expression, but I think it's so interesting how it also goes hand in hand with community building. So, in my case.
Entonces, se suele ver el idioma como algo integrado, pero al final es una expresión que va de la mano con todo esto otro.
How did you guys meet?
¿Cómo se conocías? Mediante Facebook. ¿No? Mediante Facebook, como habíamos sido amigos por 2 años, ¿no? Y al final, un tercer año, Shana llegó a Bolivia y ya nos conocimos en persona. Como las personas las unen a veces ciertos objetivos o una misión, una visión. La nuestra creo que es el amor a la música, también el amor a impulsar el idioma, ¿no? Entonces son lo que nos ha unido también.
And in our case, it was the love for music and language, and that has united us.
It's beautiful because, both working on projects, both making this world beautiful. And so I'm curious about your wedding because I'm sure that it was culturally interesting for us. Aymara, was it Aymara wedding?
Hermoso, hermoso, de verdad. Me encanta lo que estoy escuchando ahora. El trabajo que ustedes hacen es hermoso, pero quisiera que me hablaran sobre su boda. Me imagino que culturalmente fue sumamente interesante. Fue una boda aymara. ¿Cómo fue?
Sí, no, lo ves como contaría alguien un poquito menos formal, ¿no? Los temas. Bueno, en la cultura aymara, no quiero generalizar, pero gran parte de las familias primero pide permiso a los padres.
Yes, and this is going to be less formal. So in the Aymara culture, not all, but many families ask the parents for permission.
Cuando los papás de Shana llegaron a su casa en La Paz, también estaba toda mi familia, ¿no? Entonces primero he pedido la mano de Shana a sus papás, a sus padres, y después ellos aceptan y recién le pido la mano a ella, ¿no? Entonces es diferente, ¿no? La cultura, como me comentaba que aquí es diferente, tal vez directamente pide la mano a la mujer, ¿no? Sin que sea la familia. Entonces, pero al final, aunque pidan las manos de manera moderna, pero solamente entre 2 personas, ambas familias, al ser testigos, tiene que agregar más fuerza, más respeto y más seriedad en la relación.
And when you include them, when you follow the tradition, it becomes stronger. It shows respect, it shows commitment, and it serves the relationship.
Continuando, cuando uno es soltero, solo es una persona, entonces dicen, no eres persona, te dicen, cuando eres soltero, cuando no tienes pareja y eres más mayor en edad de contraer matrimonio, te dicen, no eres persona. Cuando ya eres 2, te dicen, ahora sí eres persona, ahora ya eres 2, así. Entonces, hasta dicen, si el pajarito tiene pareja, vos también tienes que tener parejas. También dicen, se necesita 2 hilos para poder trenzar algo y al final sea un tejido, ¿no? Esas son sus formas de lenguaje.
They say, if a bird has a couple, you should have one as well. And there is another thing. 2 threads are required to thread. So that's how we see it in Aymara.
I'll give my perspective.
Okay. What is yours?
So it was new to me because I didn't grow up with the traditional asking of the hand. And people do in Bolivia, but in the US, we don't do it anymore. So I felt really special. But at first, I was kind of like, why are we doing this? Just ask me and we'll tell the parents. He's like, no, I have to ask you. And I didn't understand until it happened. It was so beautiful. And I'm so glad that I got that experience. I I would ask his mother questions like, how should I dress? What should I do? She said, wear white. And this is just this is the only Aymara marriage ritual which has survived colonization. But people do this one, and then they also go to civil marriage, and then they also do church marriage. So we only did the Aymara marriage first, and we did the civil marriage as well. We're legally married. But, you don't like walk down an aisle or anything like that. I wear a beautiful dress. I prepare the house. My whole family prepares to receive. But I don't do anything. I don't cook. I did receive them with appetizers, teas, and stuff like that. But his family has to do everything. So I got like all dolled up. I got the makeup. I got the, special dress made just for me. And then I had to just sit there. And even though I wanted to invite them tea, everything I prepared, no. My family said, you have to sit. They did it. And then his family came, uncles, aunts, cousins, people I had never seen before. They filled my house. They had to ask my dad permission to enter. My dad said, okay. They came into the house. And I just had to sit there. They brought dinner. They brought the china to eat the dinner. They brought beer. They brought products from their farm. So his family still practices subsistence farming. So they have food sovereignty. They can live off everything they make themselves. They brought me my family, those products, big sacks of it. And that's, since I've witnessed what it's like to harvest there, that's not a small deal. That's hours and months of labor, and beautiful products and big baskets of fruit. And it was beautiful.
Es el trabajo de horas, de días enteros, de lo que ustedes producen, lo que comparten en este ritual, y son cestas de comida que implican muchísimo trabajo.
I might add also some really cool aspects where we have a way that we bless in Aymara and Quechua culture in the Andes, and we always go counterclockwise. It's like libations, or we throw. There's a lot of things we can offer, but when we offer to the Pachamama, we always go counterclockwise. It's called chaya. But also during the irpaca, during the asking my hand, every time we went around the room, we had to go also counterclockwise. And we would ask the elders why. They haven't really given us a direct answer, but we know it's the tradition. Then they made us sit facing where the sun comes up. So we had to face east. And then also we had to chayat. So we had to make offerings to the Mother Earth. And in this case, we had like taris, which are like little woven, like the colorful woven fabrics that we make in South America. We had 2 little ones, always 2. Everything is 2. It has to be 2. They said everything has to be 2. I don't know why. They put coca leaves in the middle, which for in Bolivia, it's legal, and it's a sacred leaf. So we had coca leaves in the middle, and then we blessed around them. I thought that those things are really cool for me.
Well, this is really beautiful. When it comes to Aymara community, can you guys tell us what is special about each community, especially in its own way? What are the highlights of Aymara community? In preparations for this interview, of course, I did some research and I read about it, and I know that when somebody needs help in the community, everybody pitches in, and I know that food is the center. Can you tell us how the community functions, how you guys help each other?
Para prepararme para esta entrevista, yo estuve leyendo y, por ejemplo, vi que cuando alguien necesita ayuda, todos colaboran, por ejemplo, con alimentos, con comida. ¿Nos podrías hablar un poco sobre qué los diferencia o qué es lo especial de la comunidad?
Hay problemas como cada grupo social, ¿no? Siempre puede haber problemas familiares, problemas comunarios, digamos, un pueblo con otro pueblo, otra comunidad puede haber problemas. Pero una de las características fundamentales históricamente es que se unen y luchan juntos esto ha sucedido desde la invasión española, ¿no? 1492, pero después llegaron a cerca de Sudamérica posteriormente, ¿no? Entonces, se adaptan al cambio rápido, se adaptan al cambio, eso es otra forma. Se unen, luchan juntos a pesar de sus diferencias, se adaptan a los cambios rápidamente se adaptan. Si vinieran aquí muchos aymaras acá, y rápido se adaptarían, ya estarían con sus autos, estarían en el metro, al igual que los quechuas se han adaptado aquí. Entonces, son muy belicosos son, que se enfrentan, no tienen miedo de enfrentarse contra el Estado a veces, hasta formar, hasta ganar, ¿no? Hasta las últimas consecuencias damos nuestra vida. Sí existen símbolos como es la huipala, que tiene varios colores, ¿no? También otros tenemos la chacana, pero también tenemos nuestros líderes, recordamos a nuestros líderes que fueron, digamos, Tupac Amaru, que también luchó en 1781 en Perú, y también Tupac Katari, que luchó en lo que ahora es Bolivia, ¿no? Y ellos lucharon por cambio social, ¿no? Por ejemplo, si hace unos 500 años no sabíamos ni el castellano, no tenían muchos derechos, no tenían. Entonces han luchado por ese cambio. Aquí igual han luchado por ese cambio. Gracias a los líderes que dan su vida hay cambio, ¿no? Y por eso puedo estar aquí yo, sentado gracias a esa lucha, ¿no? En resumen, a pesar de sus diferencias, luchan juntos y se unen por una causa. Y después son belicosos y también se adaptan rápido al cambio.
500 years ago, we didn't have the same rights as those who came from Spain. And our leaders, our heroes, gave their lives. And that's why I am sitting here.
And then we also have this concept called aini. It's basically reciprocity, but it's part of like everyday thinking. Even here in Washington, D.C., in the DMV, almost every weekend, there'll be cookouts that are like mutual aid cookouts, and that's aini, right? They say, today for you, tomorrow for me. You never know when I'll need help. Today I'm going to help you. And we don't just come out and give money. It's an experience. People cook delicious food, and then they sell it. Because there's also, I noticed, just kind of like trying to look at my culture, especially living in Bolivia, that people don't like to just ask for things. They feel weird. Ask. You have to give something to receive, right? It's like the idea of reciprocity, not just giving, not just receiving. It has to be mutual. They can't just say, hey, we need help. They say, I'm cooking something of value for you. Please buy it for me so I can help these people. Let's say they have a medical expense. It's usually, or maybe someone's parents died and they need to move the body to Bolivia. That kind of thing. Aini. That's what it's called.
And that is, that's the word coming from Aymara language.
Quechua and Aymara use the same. We share about 30% of words. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Aylan.
Necesito que traduzca lo que ella dijo. Estaba hablando sobre Aini.
Se ha entendido bien.
So it's fine. She just...
Okay. In general, so Aymara language, I know that a lot of indigenous languages are connected to nature. Could you say the same about Aymara?
Absolutely. Everything about Aymara culture has to do with nature. I remember when my abuelita came to visit us here in Virginia, and just all the metaphors she would make, and then every animal she saw, even the squirrels or the pigeons, she would say, I wonder what that tastes like cooked. She's very, we sometimes ignore the natural world. Everything. I mean, and all of the way she would describe things was through metaphors and nature. And then now in Bolivia, because I'm really surrounded by the culture, we bless and ask for and thank the Pachamama, so like Mother Earth, for everything. I mean, she's like the center of our life. And I think it's really beautiful. And I think I love the comforts of the U.S. I love it's very comfortable to live here. We have a lot of technological advances, but when you're back in Bolivia, a lot of places don't have some of the comforts you have here. But because of that, you hear more, you hear the rain, you hear the wind, you feel the dust come, you feel the sun. And I think just living like that, you're so aware of how powerful nature is. And there's a very beautiful concept, I think, in Aymara and Quechua culture and the Andean cultures. They don't take anything without giving first. Always. You have to give. You have to. When they built my house, we had to give offerings to the ground, thank you for letting us make this scar into you. And before Eber and his mom plant, they say thank you to Pachamama. With sugar and other offerings, and they even speak to her. And I think that's really smart. I think if we had maintained that way of thinking throughout industrialization, we may not have been in this be facing this climate change disaster like we are today. And because if you realize that that for every action there's a reaction, I mean, that's science, right? But if you really practice it every day, it makes you think twice about, okay, what impact is this going to have? How can I do this in a smarter way? How can I give back? ¿Entendiste?
Sí, porque me lo ha contado.
He's saying that he just understood what she said because they had discussed it.
And again, so do you think what we are discussing today, it's not really possible to maintain this culture and connection without keeping language alive?
¿Tú crees que podría mantener su cultura y su conexión sin mantener la lengua viva?
O la conexión con la Pachamama, ¿no? También.
Las prácticas culturales pueden sobrevivir, pero el idioma ya no puede ser usado. Entonces, hay otros que sí pueden hablar el idioma, pero y también las prácticas culturales. Entonces, el futuro del idioma pienso que mucho depende de los hablantes, desde el núcleo familiar que hable a su hijo o hija, ¿no? Pero hay momentos, pienso que ahora, digamos, hay muchos impulsadores del idioma. Hay TikTokers, quechuas, aymaras, hay gente de Facebook que hace transmisiones en su idioma, hay profesores que están en el mundo digital enseñando aymara, ¿no? Ha habido una fuerte corriente desde los años 90 del Estado. Hay una política lingüística que si quieres trabajar en el Estado, tienes que saber un idioma originario, ¿no? Y algo que quiero aclarar para todos los que me están escuchando es que no solamente existe aymara y quechua, existen como 38 idiomas dentro de Bolivia. Y Bolivia no solamente es altiplano, gran parte es Amazonía, entonces existe una diversidad muy grande. Pero digo esto porque a veces solo ciertos grupos, por decir, solo hablamos aymara, quechua. Existen otros grupos, guaraní, tupi-guaraní, chacobo, uruchipaya, existen varios. Y por lo menos al mencionarlos, quiero que las personas sepan que existen más culturas y más diversidad que también necesitan apoyo del Estado, apoyo de otras instituciones, ¿no? Porque cuando existen solo 100 hablantes, 90 hablantes, ya es muy complicado, pero cuando la lengua está viva, creo que se puede trabajar mejor.
So there is more than Aymara and Quechua. There is Guarani, Uruchipoya, many more cultures and a lot of diversity that do need support. When you only have 100 or 90 speakers, it's really complicated, but they need support in order to keep their languages and culture alive.
I do think that if you lose language, you do lose a part of that connection. I think with Pachamama, with Mother Earth, with our way of seeing the world, I do think you lose something. You can translate some stuff, but not everything. That's why there exists the art and skill of interpreting, right? It's languages aren't exactly the same, and there's so many secrets to how people think involved in language. For me, it's been so eye-opening to relearn. I had rudimentary, but to like really consciously relearn Aymara and Quechua in a very formal setting, because it helps me understand why I speak Spanish the way I do. So the Spanish in Bolivia and parts of Peru is considered Andean Spanish. But when you go to school and you learn Spanish here, like in DC, you learn a different kind of Spanish, and you kind of don't understand why you speak that way. Apparently, our Spanish is like an almost exact translation from Aymara and Quechua into Spanish. So that's why we use syntax certain ways, why we pronounce things certain ways. I think that's amazing. And then also, you learn things about cultural values that I think would disappear if you don't have the language anymore. For example, in Aymara and Quechua, there wasn't historically a way to say thank you before the Spanish came. And they only they kind of translate Spanish to say thank you. It makes you think, what, are they just ungrateful people? No, I mean, they're human. Of course they have that feeling like every other person has. But it's expressed in a different way. It's not expressed with language. It's expressed with that reciprocity. Someone gives you a gift, you always remember it. You always go visit them. You accompany them. You don't leave them alone. It's not just done with a thank you. It's like an enlace. It's a connection there forever. So I do think you lose, maybe not everything, but you lose something when you lose language.
En Aymara y en Quechua no se expresa gracias como una palabra. Y no porque sean desagradecidos, sino porque se expresa de otra forma, se expresa con la reciprocidad, se expresa con el recordar, con acompañar y con dar algo en retorno. Y de esa forma se nota la diferencia cultural. Entonces sí, cuando se pierde la conexión con el idioma, se pierde el idioma, se pierde un poco la conexión.
You're both language activists, you're both running incredible projects. In your opinion, if you would recommend people like us, I run a language company, to assist our communities, what first actionable steps we should do to keep languages alive?
Esos son activistas de los idiomas, de las lenguas. Cada uno maneja proyectos increíbles. Y yo manejo una empresa de idiomas. ¿Qué recomendación darían a la hora de asistir a la comunidad en torno a esta materia? ¿Qué acciones o pasos se pueden seguir para lograr? Para trabajar en el campo
Depende del idioma, ¿no? Depende de tu objetivo que tengas. Eso me recuerda a mi docente de literatura. Entonces ella necesitaba alguien en la comunidad que sea su amigo, ¿no? Para poder acercarse a la comunidad. Creo que ese es un método. Yo lo veo, si hablamos específicamente como método de investigación, método de trabajo, es una forma de acercarse a la comunidad mediante alguien de la comunidad, ¿no? Que para tener confianza y para tener empatía y para que pueda abrirse, ¿no? Entonces, retomando lo que decía que tenía mi docente de literatura, ella lo que hacía es hacer eso, tener un conocido, ¿no? Buscar a un conocido, encontrar a alguien y preguntar. Porque si está en literatura oral, ella buscaba cuentos, buscaba saberes, conocimiento. Entonces, en la comunidad siempre hay alguien que sabe más que los demás en una comunidad. Entonces, para poder sacar información, ella llevaba regalitos, ¿no? O devolvía, hecho ya el libro que he investigado, devolvía. Eso es. Otras formas que hicieron antiguamente, tienen dos caras estos, pasando a otra cosa, es la religión. Hubo gente, digamos, que aprendió el idioma, ¿no? Religiosos, o sea, de España, de los años 1500, etcétera, ¿no? En la colonización, aprendieron el idioma, también lo escribieron, pero el idioma sobrevivió gracias a eso, de forma escrita. Pero la otra cara es que los han hecho. Tú lo que crees, tal vez en una montaña, en un río, está mal. Eso es eso está mal, eso es, por ejemplo, decir es que es del diablo, es de Satanás, etcétera. Pachamama es Satanás, cosas así en la mente de las personas. Pero yo pienso que si uno cree en una cruz religiosa, una cruz de madera, está bien. Si uno cree en una montaña, está bien, ¿no? Estamos en otro tiempo, ¿no? Que ya no es ese tiempo que era tan difícil de creer en otra cosa que pensar en diferente. Eso ya ha pasado, ¿no? Aunque hay personas que siguen diciendo así que mi cultura es mejor, vale esto, tu cosmovisión no vale.
What I think is that if you believe in a cross or in a mountain, that's okay. It's a different time now. And it shouldn't be so hard to believe and differently. And I think that's important. In my culture, we have different cosmovisions and they are all important.
In my view, I think that platform, sharing space with speakers of I can speak about communities that are indigenous language communities like ours, platform of space, especially on social media. And I think it's important to help visibilize, but not to speak maybe for communities, like maybe myself with the Quechua project, we have space on social media. I also have to remember to give a platform to and open more space to native speakers, right? I'm a relearner, but it's important to give space, I think, to native speakers because for so long they've been talked over, they've been spoken for. And I think that when communities like ours tell our language story or have the space to say, hey, I love my language, my language is powerful and it's not inferior to English, it's not inferior to any other language in the world. I think that when other people see that from any language community, anywhere in the world, it helps them think, okay, you know what? My language is also valuable. Comes back to the first question you were asking about language diversity. Are we heading towards just English, just, 3 languages in the world with AI helping us? I think we have to make a choice to not go that direction because of how much we could lose, not just in the experience, the good experience of life, but also in intelligence and human intelligences that exist in different forms throughout the world.
Thank you for that. And thank you for what you're doing, because that's precisely what our society needs today. And that being said, Eber, I know that you can travel in the world to the Dio project, and your music is been known in Europe, Netherlands, and so many other countries. Will you mind to perform for us today?
Muchísimas gracias por lo que acaban de compartir y por todo lo que han dicho. Eber, sé que has viajado por el mundo con tu proyecto de música, que ha sido escuchado en muchísimos países, como Países Bajos, etc. ¿Tú quisieras compartir un poco de tu música hoy con nosotros?
Es como, sí, decía, como un mix de varias canciones que canta al alto, a mi ciudad, ¿no? El alto, mi tierra querida, aunque ha sido herida, mantiene su rebeldía, luchando con energía. Es un verso dedicado a mi ciudad. También tengo otro que dice: Koya suyu marca, mayampi justa waitua, walhachama arunaka humatekia pantua, saita simai hilata, saita simai kuyaka naira, runaira, rusaran tascaña, ni. Seguimos avanzando con toda nuestra gente, siempre orgulloso de mi raza, del alto, Aymara, Quechua, directo de Bolivia, Sudamérica. Y gracias muchísimo a Astra por este espacio.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Any other artists from your community that would you recommend us to follow and where you find on social media? Because I'm sure our listeners are going to be very interested and motivated to find.
¿Hay algún artista de su comunidad que pudieran recomendar? Porque seguramente el público que nos escucha quisiera conocerlos, estarían interesados.
Yo digo, más que artistas, tal vez recomiendo buscar a un líder aymara que se llama Felipe Quispe, que es llamado el Maiko. Maiko significa líder. Y él unió a los aymaras para luchar contra varios gobiernos, ¿no? Él luchó incluso estaba su vida en riesgo cuando luchaba. Entonces fue y para mí es un líder histórico, Felipe Quispe Malcu, porque tiene varias frases inspiradoras. Por ejemplo, una de esas dice que cuando lo atraparon, cuando lo arrestaron, la policía, porque él hacía mucha lucha, le dijeron, ¿por qué luchas? ¿Por qué luchas? Él dijo, para que mi hija no sea tu sirvienta, para que mi hija no sea tu empleada.
One of the most inspiring phrases from him came when he was arrested. He was asked why he was doing that, and he said that he was fighting so that his daughter wouldn't be his mate in the future.
Una sociedad que está pasando por ciertas situaciones, etapas, necesita personas como él, ¿no? Necesita personas, porque ¿quién va a guiar una lucha? Porque otros tienen miedo, también aman a su familia, pero hay personas que tienen miedo, pero aún así luchan, ¿no? Y cuando una persona lucha, también arrastra su propia cultura, su propio idioma, ¿no? Eso es lo que pienso yo. Y una frase más de él, de Felipe Quispe, que dijo, cuando se reunió con el presidente, le dijo, yo también soy presidente. Vamos a hablar de presidente a presidente, ¿no? Porque yo no puedo ser alguien sumiso, bajar mi cabeza, ¿no? Ante una autoridad, porque yo también tengo mi gente, tengo quien me respalda, ¿no? Porque él era autoridad de muchos campesinos en Bolivia, ¿no?
Another phrase that I remember from him, it's when he met the president, he said, I am also a president. We will talk as equals because I'm not a subject of any authority. I have my people who supports me and and I represent many peasants, and that's why we talk as equals.
I'll mention a few artists as well. That's okay. So first of course, there's Eber, but then he sings, is not just a soloist, he raps with a group called Nación Rap. So that's composed of Santino, Davero, Tawit, Lipan, and of course Eber. And they all also have their soloist work outside of Nación Rap. There's also a DJ, an amateur DJ, who sometimes they do a lot of fun work with together with Eber. He calls him DJ Pukina, but online you can find him as Carlos Macusaya Cruz, right? Did I get his name right? And then there are some fellow hip-hop rappers as well, who run a group called Rapsistencia, so like raps resistance, but rapsistence, in El Alto and La Paz. And two major players there are Fado Flow and Pandora MC, right? And then a friend of mine who I've collaborated with a little bit with music there, and she's a rapper. She's amazing. Her name is La Power, and you can find her on Instagram as LAPAUWER, La Power.
Thank you for sharing. That's very inspirational.
Realmente gracias y hayaya hermanos y thank you so much.
And the final thoughts, guys, I still would like to hear from you. What message would you like to share with our listeners about the importance of language and culture identity in indigenous communities today?
I think it's that we're changing the narrative of our people. And that narrative change is that we're not only still here, we're thriving. We belong in the modern world. We're not destined to die off. We're not a thing of the past. We're not some sort of ancient human beings. We're just like everybody else. That just like every community and culture and human being in this world, an individual, we have something important to add to the world community. If we're going to be smart, if we want a better and more advanced world, we should all listen to each other and learn from each other.
Definición de identidad es compleja, ¿no? Primero, si me preguntan quién eres, decir, soy de Bolivia, eso no es tu identidad, es el lugar de donde vienes. Si me preguntan otra vez quién eres, decir, soy hombre, ese es tu género, etcétera, ¿no? Pienso yo desde mi concepto que cultura es la acumulación de varias experiencias, de varias experiencias, varias motivaciones, vivencias, ¿no? Y a veces es un poco el extremismo de una identidad y sacar cara por ello puede ser a veces un poco peligroso, ¿no? Yo busco generalmente vivir en paz. Me gusta la paz, me gusta vivir tranquilo y eso quiero reflejar en mi comunidad, ¿no? Sí es necesaria la lucha, es necesaria, pero cuando se puede estar en paz, está bien, hay que estar en paz y compartir. Al igual que yo amo la cultura hip hop que ha nacido en Nueva York, que ha nacido en esta tierra, también puedo abrazar otra cultura, puedo amar otra cultura sin dejar mi cultura, ¿no? Entonces, más que mensaje es compartir y estar en paz.
So my main ideas would be sharing, living in peace, and fighting when it is necessary.
Thank you very much, guys. And if any of our listeners want to find you, where can we find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram as @Shana Inofuentes. That's ShanaInofuentes. And there in my bio, there are links to the Quechua project, to the film we're doing, Kuti Film. And so for me, social is the best. Eber?
Bueno, en Facebook como Eber Miranda y en YouTube el nombre de mi grupo que es Nación Rap. Y muchas gracias a todo el equipo que está presente ahora por escucharnos y darnos su tiempo y trabajo para compartir este tiempo, ¿no? De hablar de los idiomas. Muchas gracias.
And I wanted to thank the whole team for sharing with us this time and all this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm looking forward to your documentary. Please let us know when it's coming out.
Absolutely.
And thank you to all our listeners to join us today. As always, thank you for your support. And please help us growing our community. We need your help. Check out our website, and I'll see you next time.
Host, Elena Petrova. Executive Producer, Alina Ruzmitova. Production Manager, Fadi Tawfiq. Closed Captioning Producer, Lynn Dixon. Editor, Delfina Morijo. Visual Effects and Animation, Shadi Tawfiq.